Happy Tuesday and welcome to Conversations and Courage with your girl, Imani Capri, right here on 95.9 FM, WOVU Cleveland. We are also joined today by our awesome guest, aka the doctors, Dr. Shaman Rah and Dr. Karim R. Ellis, the #1 breakthrough strategists, are here today. This is the #1 power platform celebrating courage, healing, resilience, and transformation. It is also the show where we interview interesting people who are doing powerful, positive things with a courageous spirit, not only in our local area, but all around the globe. So listen, I am so excited for our episode today because listen, I've been on the air here at WOVU for 5 years. And I did not necessarily see that I would have co-hosts when I first started out, but being a one-woman show, and I'm like the Caribbean folks with multiple jobs from In Living Color. Those of you who are old enough to remember In Living Color, they said, I got 3 jobs, man. I record, I book, I produce. Having some help on the show, having capable, entertaining, fun help on the show is awesome. So today I am very happy to allow Dr. Shaman Rah to lead our conversation. Before we jump into the conversation quickly, I want to remind folks that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. If you yourself are a survivor or have any family or friends that may need help dealing with sexual assault, please know that there are resources to help you. Here in Cleveland, we have the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. You can contact them at 216-619-6192, 216-619-6192. There's also the National Sexual Assault Hotline. You can call 1-800-656-4673. 1-800-656-4673. I am also reminded that this month, April, is, I think, National Poetry Month. So, I think on one of the breaks, we're going to go ahead and play some music from our very own Honey Bell Bay poet laureate here in Ohio and Cuyahoga County. So had to put that out there that this is a very special month. Shaman Rah, we are super excited to have you lead us in our conversation today. And as you informed me earlier, that the focus of our conversation and show today is the human experience and the journey back home. So with that being said, I pass you the
Pass me the
conversation,
mic.
courage, and Mike.
Coach,
That's
put
right.
me in. Coach, put me in. I'm ready. I'm
You
ready.
in the game. You in the game.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to say hello to everybody out there. This is going to be a topic that's going to be very interesting because I'm going to actually take us back home. I'm going to take you where a lot of us just have not thought. And it's going to spark you. It's going to spark some thoughts really deep within you. And I know we talked about last month with Women's Awareness, and we kind of also tapped into or segued into what men need to feel valued. So I want to kind of tap into this with that. First of all, in order for us to be for men to feel valued, we have to first value ourselves. And how do we value ourselves? We have to know who we are. It comes from self-knowledge, self-respect, and self-love. So we have those 3 things, and we can begin to open up to see things. And with that knowledge and that ability, it kind of taps into what I want to talk about when I talk about the journey home and the human experience. We all are human beings. We all can admit that. We all can agree upon that. But the big thing is we have to remember is we're spirits before we're human beings. And I just did a seminar recently where I showed pictures of what the actual consciousness, the pure consciousness spirit looks like. And it's very, it's profound. Matter of fact, if I might send Imani some pictures so you can see it. But this is who you are. This is a pure consciousness. You are pure consciousness as spirit. And that consciousness is like a cup dipped out of an ocean that basically gives you your individuality. And that individuality begins to develop within the human being. That's the soul. Okay, so that soul still is connected to that spirit or that pure consciousness. Now, pure consciousness remembers God, and it remembers why we came here. So the whole conversation about today and journeying back home and human experience is this. So many people are here on this earth in this density because the earth is dense. This human experience is dense. We have so many challenges. We have so many travesties. We have so many traumas we have to deal with. But all these traumas and travesties and all these challenges have been placed in our way so that we can graduate, so we can move into a higher station of consciousness. So we got to forget the human body for just 1 second and let's go back into consciousness. Every one of us, including us right now on this show, discussed this conversation before we got here. Consciously, we discussed it. And then consciously, we both, or all three of us, were incarnated into our bodies and we came down. And it took some years to get here, but we're finally here. So what happens is in the consciousness, we begin to remember what we need to do to graduate at that next level of spirit. But we come to the human incarnation, or we become incarnated as human beings so we can do that. Without coming to earth, the pure consciousness cannot elevate in the fourth dimension, or cannot develop or elevate back into the house of God, because we have to come to the third dimension or to the earthly plane to actually get the experience of being our God self, or God within us, so we can experience everything that God experiences. So we're so excited and happy about becoming these human beings, but we come down into these lives and these experiences that are so dense sometimes. And people ask, why do we get these dense experiences? Usually the most or the biggest reason we get the dense experiences because we're at a station in the fourth dimension where we want to elevate faster. And I talk about the different dimensions, and we had the third dimension, earth was where we are. The fourth dimension is where the spirits all transition, and the fourth dimension is a learning ground, but it's a fast learning ground because it's absent of time and space. But then we come to the third dimension, which is the earth and human experience, and we have time and space. So what we couldn't get up in the fourth dimension because things were moving too fast, we're now able to come into the third dimension to receive. So we can make a decision now, and we have time before that decision actually manifests, or before we have time to make a change or a different choice. And I talked about that CEO before. We have choices, we have opportunities, and we have experiences. Well, the choice is going to yield an opportunity, and the opportunity is going to, or the choice is going to yield an experience, and the experience is going to yield an opportunity. So it's a whole nother subject. I'm not going to get into that. But we also want to remember that when we come here, we have all of these abilities and memories of we are pure consciousness, and we want to graduate, we want to elevate, because as we elevate, we continue the path of ascension. Now, the path of ascension purely when we come to the human existence is just to remember that we're trying to find the God within ourselves. As soon as we do that, we begin the ascension process. And that's kind of just a little background, because as we begin that ascension process as human beings, we begin to understand and remember that we're pure consciousness. And everything we're going through here on this earth, especially the dense experiences, are the experiences that we've asked for so that we can graduate or move higher in the station in a higher dimension. So therefore, if we want to move fast in our graduation or in our ascension process in the fourth dimension, we may have to come down to the third dimension and experience all kind of trauma, all kind of discord, all kind of pain and challenges. And we constantly are trying to get ahead. And we do that because when we can begin to find the God within ourselves at that point, at the lowest point of our human experience, we automatically graduate and we move up. And then the human experience is attained. We get the learning from every experience, and we start to graduate and move forward, because now we're creating like God. Then the next thing is, as pure consciousness, we got to remember, as human beings, all we have to do is begin to change our thought, and we begin to change our lives, because a thought is going to create an action, and action is going to create a habit, and the habit is going to create a paradigm, and that paradigm is going to create a reality. So if we can go through those steps and remember those steps, just changing our thoughts, we can begin to shift our experiences. The first thought we need to begin to change is we got to forget the human experience. We got to remember we're here as spirits first. And the spiritual experience we're supposed to get is to learn how to understand, how to forgive, and most of all, how to love. And once we begin to learn those things, then the spirit of the pure consciousness begins to expand into a brighter light. And then we begin to change everything around us. So that's why you see some people that come from so many dark spaces and they become these brilliant lights, is because they found the God within. And that is their experience. So Now, when they get that experience, they elevate back. When we transition, we go back into the heavens, they go back into the fourth dimension, and we get our graduation, our cap and gown. Everybody loves that cap and gown, and we move up into a higher understanding of self, of God. What happens when we don't get that learning from the third dimension? And we have people that are talking about, man, Earth is the ghetto. I don't ever want to come back here. It's so dense. It's so uncomfortable. When I get out of here, I'm going to graduate and go up and I'm going to be in the heavens and I'm going to enjoy my life. Well, it doesn't work that way. Because what happens is you're pure consciousness. And in that pure consciousness, you remember in the consciousness, maybe not in the human mind or in the human brain, why you're here. And what happens is the pure consciousness is saying to the brain, hey, listen, the higher self is saying, listen, we got to do these things. We got to go through this. We got to elevate. We got to understand. We got to become godlike. And the human mind gets attached to that consciousness, which is of the ego, the unpure consciousness. And the ego is all the learnings that we have. And when we get all these learnings over and over again, it makes us bitter sometimes. And we decide we don't want to be on earth. So just a long story short, what happens is we don't want to be here on earth. And then eventually we transition and we hate life. And we go back up into the heavens, back up into the fourth dimension. And all of a sudden the spirit's like, oh man, we missed it. And all of a sudden when that human body is shed, the pure consciousness comes out. And the pure consciousness is like, oh my God, what have I done? I've completely missed my opportunity. So then you go back up into the fourth dimension. And when you get to the fourth dimension, this is what happens. You begin to beg and plead for God to let you come back down to this third dimension. And that's why we keep coming back, because we forget in the human consciousness, but the pure consciousness always remembers what we're supposed to be doing. And so I tell everybody, trust me, you might feel that you don't want to come back now, but as soon as you drop this physical body and you haven't attained what you're supposed to attain according to your spirit, then what's going to happen is you're going to beg to come back. And then we have those that have ascended and they go up into the heavens and they look down, they say, earth needs help. And these ascended masters in pure consciousness come back into bodies and they have to go through the same process. They forget and everything changes and then begin to remember. And then eventually in their lives, they begin to become the teachers that they're supposed to be. And they begin to lead people into the light so they can come out of their own darkness. So that is the journey back home, is learning to tap into the inner consciousness of ourselves and let that consciousness leave us and forget the human experience and notice bigger than this human experience, because it took many human experiences for us to get to this point. On average, 75 million lifetimes. The pure consciousness holds those memories. So
can I just interrupt
for us to feel valued? Oh yeah, go ahead. I was about to turn it over to you.
Nope. It don't. Well, if I don't want to stop your flow. I was just going to say something, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you can say it, because that's pretty much where I'm at. It's a lot of information I just dropped right there.
Yeah.
And it's some people are like, man, I ain't never heard this stuff before in my life. Well, if you haven't heard of it, reach out to me. I'd be glad to show it to you and break it down really slowly, because we only got so much time in this episode. But no, I want to turn this over to you guys. And if you have heard of this before, talk to me about it. If you haven't heard of it, what do you feel about it? And let me talk to you and give you some more pointers and understanding. But I hear people talk about the earth as this terrible place, but it's really not. This is the place where we have to graduate. It's like, this is our zone. If you want to look at in third dimension, this is the war zone. This is the place we got to graduate from. This is the place we got to win the war. And there's many wars that we're going to fight, or many battles. This is the battleground. And this is what we had to battle our lower selves to become our higher selves. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to turn that over to you guys. What do you all think?
Before we share what we think, we have a little more than like 2 minutes before the break.
I took up a lot of time. I had a lot.
No, that's okay. So I don't know. Dr. Kareem, do you want to jump in or you want to wait until after the break?
I want to wait.
Okay. All right. So I'll take us up to the break. First of all, for the listener who is out there like, wait, what? I just see that little emoji that has like the brain exploding, right? It's okay. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. I think that this is an important, powerful topic, because as we look around our modern 3D world, there are a lot of things happening and going on, and people are definitely trying to make sense of it all, trying to find their balance. when our episode airs, we will have been coming out of celebrating Resurrection Sunday and the whole Passover season, right? And so I think that no matter what religion you may resonate with, there are certain key fundamental universal laws and principles that apply to all of us. It ultimately is all one truth that maybe we scoop into at different frequencies, right? And so the commonality that I think we're all seeking for is to understand, how do we make sense of the things we experience in our earth walk, and how do we rise along our journey into who it is that we were supposed to be, right? Come back into the remembering of, oh, this is my purpose, or this is what I signed up to do in coming here, what I'm supposed to contribute to the collective, not only to help others, but also to help myself, evolve and expand my own consciousness. So this concept is not foreign to me. I have been practicing Nichiren Buddhism for 20 plus years. And that was probably the first place I was introduced to the idea of there being a certain type of journey after you transition, and it all being based on your consciousness, or in Nichiren Buddhism, as we say, a life condition, right? I've always believed in God, but I always felt like there were questions or things that I was seeking the answers to that I wasn't necessarily getting in the Baptist church that I grew up in. And so when I started practicing Nichiren Buddhism, one of the things that we studied is that the moment of death is very important, like what your energetic state is, what your mindset is, because we release the body and we are pure energy and pure consciousness. Nichiren Buddhism teaches you will merge back into the universe at the level that matches the frequency of your consciousness. And because there is no time and space outside of Earth, right, as we know it, that becomes kind of like your reality. So knowing how to master your mind, knowing how to work with your own energy, knowing how to tap into the energy of the God of your understanding through consciousness is essential. So this topic feels very at home for me. We got to go to the break. I can't wait to hear what Dr. Karim has to say. And I know that listeners out there are like, yo, this is deep. Some people are like, yes. And I know some people are like, wait, what? Wherever you are, stay tuned. We're going to have something for everybody to get in some sort of understanding on this conversation today. You are listening to Conversations in Courage with your girl, Imani Capri, Dr. Shaman Rah, and Dr. Karim R. Ellis, the #1 breakthrough strategist, right here on 95.9 FM, WOVU Cleveland. We'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to Conversations in Courage with the girl, Imani Capri, right here on 95.9 FM, WOVU Cleveland, and Dr. Karim R. Ellis, the #1 breakthrough strategist, and Dr. Shaman Rah, the one who says what's on the inside manifests on the outside. So thank you for joining us today. We are having a very powerful and deep conversation that is definitely going to have you thinking about some things and the meaning of life and your purpose in it. Shaman Rah, Dr. Shaman Rah, is leading our conversation today, and the topic is the human experience and our journey back home, why we should appreciate being human beings and the opportunity that gives us for evolving as pure consciousness. Dr. Ellis, I'm tagging you in. What you got to say?
I'm coming in off the top rope. So I got a couple things, because we went in quick, hard, and fast. I don't even think I didn't have my seatbelt on for this one. I'm just like, okay, wait a minute, we're going to. Because, I train speakers, and I say that as a speaker, right, there's 2 ways to take you on a mission. I can take you snorkeling, and when we go snorkeling, you got your little tube that has, a couple of swallows of air stuck inside of it, and you got your face under the water. You can see the fish, but you can't go too deep. And then you got the equivalent of the opposite, which is scuba diving, which is I got my tank on, and my tank holds 2 hours of oxygen, and I go deep. And I'm concerned that we may have some listeners that got in here with scuba gear on for snorkeling, and Dr. Shaman just took us scuba diving. He may have drowned some of us. Y'all remember Sonic the Hedgehog where you underwater, you got 3 minutes to get that air bubble, and it goes dum, 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 dum,
That's right.
Right? So we need the listeners to be prepared, because we may be going deeper than you may be ready for this morning, but we know Shaman got us covered. He's gonna make sure that we understand where we're going to, so we don't drown down on the bottom of the ocean. I guess where I want to start at, because I'm full of questions as well. I'm a believer in purpose, meaning that I don't believe I've been put here by accident. I believe that my existence is intentional. I don't believe God is accidental when he put me here. And for me to walk out my divine assignment on this planet, for me, it wraps around knowing who I am, right? What I've seen with a lot of people I've trained and coached, the reason why I saw them not walk out their purpose is they had no idea who they are. It's like once you get brass tacks idea of who you are and whose you are, it's easier for you to step into your assigned role while you're here on the planet. So I'm real big on what I call identity theft, because I believe there's so many of us walking the planet and we don't have the brass tacks on who we are. We're what the world has assigned to us or told us to be. And most of us don't really search inside. I mean, as a kid growing up, I was kind of told what I was going to be growing up. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to do this, going to do that. No one ever sat there and gave me the chance to figure it out for myself. So, Shaman, one of the questions I want to ask you is for folks that's walking this planet, victims of identity theft, how do they figure out who they are?
That's a great question. The biggest thing when you're looking at how to find out who you are is, number one, start to quiet your mind and start to become aware. Awareness is key, because what you want to do is begin to look around you and see, are you operating out of your own energy, or are you operating out of an energy that has been projected upon you? Or that you've actually been you're trying to be accepted. You know, acceptance is one huge thing that puts us outside of our space. And a lot of us have been put into acceptance positions or trying to be accepted from the beginning of life. So that's a great question. First thing we have to do is quiet our minds. Okay. We have to quiet our minds, and we have to then become observant. We have to begin to become aware. Who are we? What are we? Is my life in turmoil? Am I getting the same lessons over and over and over and over again? So, you know, if we're looking at awareness and we're getting lessons over and over and over, and they continue to happen to us, there's something we're not learning. There's something about us that we have to go deeper in. And most of us are going to look at life and purpose and, you know, should I be a doctor? Should I be a lawyer? Should I be this? Or what kind of work should I do? I should be a family man like this. I should be in a relationship like this. All these are stipulations that are dictated to us by society. So you got to ask yourself, am I flowing with who I am, or am I flowing with what society wants me to be? And if I'm flowing with what society wants me to be, and I'm in discord, and I'm having these lessons over and over again, I got to stop. I got to think and quiet my mind and say, okay, who am I? What do I really like? What do I really want to be? What floats my boat? You know, because when we start to figure those things out, that key is awareness. When we start to figure that out about ourselves, we can begin to then make a change. But until we stop and sit still for a moment and just observe through awareness, are we trying to conform? Or are we trying to be individualized? Are we trying to be ourselves? What is it? That's the first step, I would say. But we can't do anything until we can do that. We have to know who we are.
So I'll ask this. I want to ask Imani the same thing. It took me to the age of 26 to really start to ask that real question of who am I? And it took me to the age of 36 to finally get a hold of who I am. Like, it wasn't overnight. It wasn't like I asked the question and, oh, I got it. Like, it took me years to really get down to brass tacks of who I am. And it made it easier to walk the walk I'm going through now and to stand my ground. So what Shaman and Imani, I'm curious to figure out, like, what age were you when you start to figure out who you are?
Well,
why you smile when you
me? Or wait, why was I smiling, or why was Shaman?
Like, well,
no, because like honestly, I have one thing Shaman says, like, if you have kind of like that shaman energy in your spiritual lineage, you are constantly going through like deaths and rebirths. Yeah. So that's why I smile and laugh, because you know, I could say I'm learning more things about myself now at the age of 44 that I didn't know 6 months ago. You know, so I think that the concept of who I am is always evolving. But I would say that my awakening into who I really am versus what has maybe been projected upon me didn't start till I was probably around the age you were, 26. And like around 26, 27 was the time that I was actively pursuing legal charges against my mom's ex-husband for the abuse. And by that time, I had been practicing Nichiren Buddhism for several years. And one thing that resonated with me about Buddhism, like I was raised in a Baptist church, and then my mom married somebody who was Muslim. And, you know, I always believed in God, but I had to kind of find the way, how do I connect with God in a way that really feels real to me? So I grew up in the church. I never dismissed the church, but I always felt like something was still missing. Islam, as practiced with the Nation of Islam, wasn't my thing. And I'm very much clear. Like you can't be assalamu alaikum and raping me at the same time. Like, how that work? Like, I'm just not with that, right? So, and no disrespect to anybody who's listening who's Muslim. I'm just talking about my own experience, okay? So by the time that I was out of that environment and on my own, and I asked God for three things. I got on my knees and I prayed and I asked God for three things. I asked to really know what it means to be happy, to really know what it means to live life on a higher dimension, and a teacher to show me how to do it. I don't even know. I was in such a suffering place at that time that I don't even really know. That had to have been my higher self asking for those three things. And eventually I was introduced to Buddhism and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo like Tina Turner. The thing that helped me start unlocking myself with Buddhism was it gave me something to start thinking about myself outside the context of what I had experienced that shifted me. It gave me a frame of reference to start thinking about who am I beyond the traumas. Who am I beyond? Because I mean, my whole childhood was not trauma. I actually had a very cushy childhood up until my mom got married to this guy. So it probably was not until I started my journey with Buddhism, seeking a way to heal myself, that I really started to learn who I am. And through my practice of Nichiren Buddhism, which is all about taking responsibility for your own life, no matter what has happened to you, you taking responsibility for the cleanup job, you taking responsibility for deciding what you want the next chapters of your life to look like, and then it giving you like a daily practice of how to tap into that power within. So in that journey, what I started to learn was that I was not a victim, that I was actually really strong, that I was really courageous, you know. But I never forget, I had a mentor in my life at that time. I call her my Mrs. Miyagi because she's this very petite Japanese woman with a very thick Japanese accent. And I remember her saying to me how much I was going to appreciate my mother and her ex-husband at one point, because at that time, they were my greatest enemies. And she said, it's your greatest enemies that ultimately help teach you who you are, because they push you. The way they function in your life forces you to either fold or discover what makes you who you are. So that process for me didn't really start until I was in my mid-20s. And then by the time that I was able to go to court and prosecute my mom's ex-husband, I was, you know, in my later 20s at that point. And there were things that I thought I knew about myself for sure. But as I've continued this journey of self-healing and self-exploration, like I'm always learning things. So that was a long answer to your question, but it started when I was in my 20s, and here I am now at the wonderful age of 44, and who I know myself to be today, and still see how my higher self and God is working in me. I'm very different from who I was at 26. or who I was at 34. So that's my answer. Sorry.
So Shaman, how do we deal with somebody who goes through the transformation process but doesn't understand you're always in a state of perpetual evolution? Because I've run into some people where they have evolved, but then they're stuck. Like this is my new comfort, and I don't want to go to the next level. I want to stay here.
Right.
How do you deal with someone like that, or how do you inspire somebody to say you still got to keep going through this process of growth?
That's a great question, but as all the true masters understand, everybody has their own truth. Your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth.
Sure.
If you decide to stay stagnant, that's your truth. All we can do as the teachers is show them the path where they can move into something more something better or more enlightened. Now, if they choose to stay where they are, then we have to respect that, because we can't rob them of their experience, because everybody comes here for a specific experience, and we're here to show the way, but we're not here to pull them through the fire.
Sure.
If they want to sit in the fire, then that's their choice. But eventually, when you sit in fire long enough, you're going to move.
Are you going to burn up?
That's the truth. But yeah, so it's self-motivation, because what happens if you begin to motivate them, what happens is they look to you to always motivate them. But we want to teach them to be the motivators of themselves. So you give them the tools, and you show them where to go, and you say, let's follow me, and lead them. But if they decide they want to stay where they are, then we allow them to stay there until they're ready to move. And if they when they're ready to move, they'll reach back out and they'll ask, hey, okay, I'm ready, or how do I do this again? And we're open to show. And Imani, I want to say one thing about you, and just to jump back, when you began to talk to your Mrs. Miyagi, and she told you about you're going to end up loving your oppressors the most, you begin to express the divine quality of God. You tapped into it, and that's what freed you. And so that's what we have to know. So Dr. Ellis, what we also got to do is we got to help people to understand, when we're able to embody that energy of God, that love, that forgiveness, that understanding, then we actually break ourselves free, because sometimes we're stuck in this pattern and we don't want to move. It's because we're trying to express as human beings and not our God self.
And one of the powerful things I've learned, and looking back at why I, quote unquote, as a spirit may have agreed or chose those experiences, right? And this, I remember reading something. This is what made me choose to focus my study in Buddhism, because I was seeking the answer, like, I believe in God and God is real, then why would God let this happen to me?
Right.
And I was reading something in a book one day at a Buddhist study meeting, and it said that, I read the term bodhisattvas, and it said the bodhisattvas were like these souls that choose certain hardships in order to teach other people how powerful they are, how to be resilient, or how to teach the power of God or the law, right? And something in my spirit was like, that's me. Like, I'm one of those. That's why I went through all of this, because I'm supposed to help free other people, right? So what started to happen with me is I started praying to understand what were the most difficult actors in my life there to teach me. And once I started going in that space, then you're right, I did start healing at a rapid pace. I realized my mother was one of my greatest teachers about forgiveness and compassion. My mother's ex-husband, who was also the biological father of two of my siblings, was a teacher about me tapping into my own strength. I could go down the list, but that was how I started to really begin shifting out of like that victim mindset and cultivating those godlike qualities within. And before we went to the break, I heard in my spirit, when we make our work a commitment to cultivating the divine qualities of God within us, that guides us to God, right? And part of what you teach is that God is limitless. God is perfect freedom. God is complete love, right? So when we cultivate those qualities, we literally become a frequency match to the Most High. Then we begin to experience the Most High. But we each, now we coming out of Resurrection Sunday, right? And no offense to any of our listeners, a lot of our listeners are Christian, and that's part of my lineage. I will never deny that. But I think the time that we are in now, like in order to cultivate those qualities of God, you have to be willing to carry your own cross, which means you have to be willing to do your own shadow work, not looking for someone else to absolve you of looking at the hardships within your own life and saying, how is this the perfect formula for me to cultivate the God qualities within myself?
Right.
When you're looking at things as a victim, you miss that. You don't, but when you start looking at it as like everything is functioning to bring out the aspects of God within me,
right,
and the purpose I'm here to fulfill, then that starts to put you in the victory space.
Yeah,
Breaks be coming.
I know. And hey, when you do that, you start to see things from a totally different perspective. And that's what you got to have. I mean, we have to have the test to have the testament. You know, we have to have it and we have to pass it. If we don't pass the test, we won't have the testament. You know,
that's right.
We got to pass it. And that's when we can embody the qualities of God, we can do that. So
and there's
definitely
a test at every level.
Every level. And it's shadow work. Shadow work is continuous. So yeah, Dr. Ellis, a lot of people don't want to continue going, but once we start this, you know, this train doesn't stop.
Of course.
You know, it doesn't stop. So it's in anything, even in the speaking and even in developing yourself, you're constantly developing yourself. You're not staying the same. You're not the same person you were 2 years ago.
Sure.
You know, 2 months ago, you're constantly developing and constantly finding new techniques to get the words across. The same way you speak and project to people, we need to teach people to learn themselves and pour into themselves, project to themselves.
Yep, we got to hit the break.
Gotta work. Yeah.
WOVU listeners, I mean, this is so good, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned. Listening to Conversations in Courage right here on 95.9 FM WOVU Cleveland, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station. Thank you again for joining us today. So we have been having a very powerful, I think, multi-dimensional, bottom of the ocean conversation about the human experience and the journey back home. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Shaman Rah and Dr. Karim R. Ellis. I've been saying a lot the last few questions. Dr. Ellis, what you got for us?
I mean, at this point in time, I mean, what's off limits? I mean, we done went to the bottom of the ocean. We done came back up and floated for a little bit. We done doggy paddle, treaded water. I guess I want to tap in and chime in on the concept we kind of left off of, because we talked about a lot of stuff, and I always looked at myself as a locked door. And the problem is, a lot of times we want the door to be open, but I feel like God knows what key fits us to unlock it. So a lot of times, the pain situations we go through that are designed to develop you, there's a whole keynote message I give called Snake Bitten. And in it, I talk about a person that got bitten by a poisonous snake, and he has seconds to make it to the hospital. And when he gets to the hospital, 2 questions. Number 1, why are you here? Number 2, what type of snake bit you? The second is most important, because in order to give you anti-venom, I got to know what snake bit you. If I give you the wrong anti-venom, you die. I can't give you king cobra. I can't give you black mamba if you got bit by a pit viper. And then once you're saved, your message, your mission is to go out there and help other people survive that same snake bite. So I believe we become anti-venom when we surpass the lessons that we go through that can, in essence, take us out, but we choose to be victorious over it. So in my mindset, that's kind of where I'm at. I think that all of us go through specific things. And if the bite didn't take you out, there's a reason why it didn't take you out. It was never supposed to take you out. It's supposed to help shift and shape you. And then I think that most of my level ups came through my haters. My haters have always been there to help push me further into my glorious purpose. Whether if my haters knew it, they stopped doing that dumb stuff. Like every time we come at him, we end up leveling this dude up. Like we stopped attacking him if we knew that it was going to level him up. So I like that we kind of brought some of these concepts up, or danced around some of these concepts. I think there's some folks listening today that need to understand that your transformation, I think, and process comes through the ability to navigate whatever tough situation or circumstance you're sitting in. We know, looking at social media, people are going through heck in a handbasket. Look, I caught that cuss word.
You can say that word. Yeah, you can say that word.
Double hockey sticks.
You can say it. You can say it.
Well, okay, so people are going through hell in a handbasket. And I'm looking at a lot of people's on the verge of giving up or giving out or whatever have you. So I think it's great that people understand that it's not designed to take you out. It's designed to actually elevate you to the next level. But unless I have that type of mindset, that will always be a limitation for me. So I'm glad we touched base on that.
And let's be honest, that is a process to cultivate that, because Shaman, how do you reconcile, and we have about 14 minutes and 45 seconds left to the show. How do you reconcile, this is a very deep, vast idea that we are kind of like breaking down in digestible chunks for the listeners. But if you are someone who is sitting in 3D Earth, dealing with some circumstances that feel very real, and you're trying to understand, well, how am I going to deal with these very human experiences by forgetting that I'm in a human body? How am I about to change, not having the money to feed my kids? Or how am I about to change, this other particular specific challenge by just thinking I'm a spirit and cultivating what you're saying are God-like quality. Now, I know, Shaman, but
Oh, no, you're good. I got you. It's real simple, because some people hear that, but then that's where we have to go into the understanding of awareness. We have to hear the whole totality of what I'm saying. Yeah, we have to remember, first of all, we're spirits before we're humans, but we also have to remember we're humans as spirits too. So we're having a human experience so that we can elevate the spirit, okay? That pure consciousness. Now, the only way to really elevate that pure consciousness through our experience, especially the negative experiences, is through shadow work. And that's through finding the negative emotions that are controlling us. So if we begin to find the negative emotions that are controlling us, which I call them the negative archetypes, those negative archetypes play usually through 5 spaces in our lives. I call them 5 houses. And those 5 houses begin to build upon each other, and they begin to create a scenario. And what you'll start to see is that scenario begins to repeat constantly, because all 5 of those archetypes, for example, it could be one that is very giving, it's a people pleaser. It could be one that is reserved and very numb and closed off. It could be one that has shut down their heart completely. It could be another one that becomes a warrior. And it could be another one that basically is just like, I don't even care anymore. And so all of these lower archetypes, and there's a whole system I have, it takes me about 30, 40 minutes to break them down and show them to you. You find these lower archetypes, and you'll find the way your negative emotions are controlling you. Once you find the way your negative emotions are controlling, you start to think like, wow, that is actually my program. That is the program that I operate through every day. Once we find that program, we can eliminate that program. And then you start to see clearly. Because the second step of this is once you identify, now you're able to actually see clearly, and then you're able to reprogram. So once you see clearly, I give the opportunity to choose a different archetype, and then we begin to reprogram you to those archetypes. Now, that comes through like a hypnosis or some type of deep meditation, so I can make these new archetypes come in fast and the old ones go out. And as we allow the old ones to go out, first of all, we have to remember these negative emotions that have helped us to survive, because that's exactly what it is. Through our lives, we begin to look at the negative emotions and we begin to dislike them. But these are the same things that helped us to survive throughout our lives. And when we're surviving throughout our lives, we have to stop and say thank you, first of all. Acknowledge these negative emotions, acknowledge these lower archetypes for doing their job, because this is the mystical marriage. This is where the human, the egoic self, does its job to save us. And then we step into the higher self to then allow ourselves to thrive and keep going. What happens with most human beings is we get caught in the savior part and we repeat that cycle. And then we begin to repeat the savior. And sometimes when you look at things, we'll repeat the savior and still be successful.
What do you mean when you say the savior cycle?
The savior is how those archetypes are working together in your egoic system or into your lower self. Or let's say, instead of saying lower self, these are the lower characteristics that are allowing you to survive through a situation.
So can you give us an example?
Let's see. Okay. I mean, I'm going to use Dr. Ellis on this. Like when your haters begin to motivate you, that motivation sometimes comes from egoic self to help you to survive through that hate. And then what happens, we begin to create something out of that hate. Now, we can create great things out of that hate, but if we think about, okay, this is my system that I'm actually working through, imagine if we were to change the system from emotions that put us or takes us out of survival and puts us into thriving. You could literally take something that might make you 10,000 customers to make you 1 million customers, because the energy comes from someplace different. And that's just an example.
No, I get what you're saying, because the problem with a lot of people that I see, and I was that way at one point in time, where the fuel of anger.
Right. Yeah.
I got you. I got you.
Right.
I got
right.
you.
Yeah.
And then you accomplish great thing. But
right.
in order for the be able to keep moving, you got to tap back into anger again.
Right.
Right. I need that same fuel. And so what happens is you start to create situations, circumstances where the byproduct is that fuel. And it keeps things moving, but you leave carnage in your wake, because every relationship dynamic you have is based off of this being the fuel needed.
Exactly.
I get it. The car don't work without it.
Exactly.
So I get the transmutation of this emotional energy versus this type of emotional energy over here. What I want to ask you a question on is this, because I long believe in Jim Rohn's famous quote: "You become the sum of the 5 people you hang with the most." So on this walk of self-discovery, how important is it that you discover folks or hang with folks that's going in the same direction as you? Because I know I had to. I'm the CEO of my life, so I reserve the right to hire and fire as needed. I went through fire. You get a pink slip. You get a pink slip. You out of here, right?
Exactly.
I hang around folks that was going to help me go in the right direction. But how important is it on this journey of self-discovery to say, I got to start releasing people, placing the things that's actually slowing me down?
100%. If you don't release, if you don't change your circle, you're not going to change, because it's just like if you clear these negative emotions out, but then you still stay around the same people that were creating these negative emotions, you're going to continue that cycle. And then you're going to have to redo them again. But guess what? The ego gets smart, and it starts to learn how to actually make these 5 archetypes a little more crafty. And so you can't find them as easy. And it'll uplift you, but then it just keep you in a state of survival. And a lot of times we don't know we're in a state of survival. For you, in your case, you learn, you like, no, this is not the right energy I need to produce in. But some people don't learn that. So that's where the awareness comes in. So it's very key and critical for us to have that awareness. So, if we look at this, a real simple way, we can do 3 steps here, is really tapping into shadow work, which is, also understanding that finding the true spirit of yourself helps you to see the higher part of yourself. Okay. Once we can begin to see the higher part of ourselves, we can understand at that point, step 2, that we are the creators of our reality. And when we understand we're the creators of our reality, then basically, if we created something that was a hardship or negative in a sense, then we can also create something that's positive. If we put that burden on something outside of us, then we have to wait for something outside of us to allow us to change. Okay, so the second part is we create their new reality, or we understand that we create our own realities. And the third thing that we have to understand really is that when I change my thought, I change my life. So that's the 3 simple steps, is really become aware through shadow work. Shadow work shows you where you're lacking. And then we begin to understand, I'm creating this reality because it clicks. I created this reality. So now let's change this and create something different. That happens when you change your thoughts. So it's real simple. It's not a hard thing.
I want to interject a quote that I actually heard this morning from Wayne Dyer. At first, let me give a little plug to Shaman. Has a powerful class called Structure of My Spirit, where he teaches you how to identify those archetypes, the negative ones, and how to reprogram. I just took that class, so it's real. But this morning, and I'm still in my 21 days of working with the new archetypes. And awesome. So one of the things, and listen, when you do the work, it is not all rainbows and butterflies. And let me tell you, now, when you get to them new habits of implementing the new energies, elevating into those next level of divine godlike qualities, yes, eventually you cross over, right? You resurrect into something new. But anyway, I was listening to something from Wayne Dyer this morning, and a powerful quote he had in reference to thoughts. He said, "Wisdom is ignoring all the thoughts that weaken you." Wisdom is ignoring all the thoughts that weaken you, only focusing on the thoughts that strengthen you, right? And how if we are kind of fed up with what is, then we need not focus our thoughts and our conversations on what is, but focus on what we intend or want to manifest, right? In the GPS class, on Wednesday, Dr. Karim, you talked about the same topic in terms of taking the limitations off of ourselves, right? So, and I'm gonna just keep it real. I'm doing the work in both of these areas because listen, I can talk about, what I learned about myself 20 something years ago, but who I am today and the tests that are before me now are very different. Like the next level of godlike qualities that I have the perfect obstacle course to bring out of me is different, and it doesn't stop, right? So I think like once you understand that you're constantly going through a cycle of death and rebirth, understanding how to go through that process and allow the process to happen, and how you create from a healthy, positive, divine place when you're going through those cycles. We got about 4 minutes left, but I just wanted to share that.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I think you have to do you have to learn the lesson, though. And I think that's what Shaman said earlier. I think before the first commercial break, which is you gotta go through the lesson. In other words, you can't do 12th grade trigonometry if you still don't understand 5th grade fractions. Like it all builds on itself. So you can't get this type of math problem or this type of blessing, handled if you ain't passed this class over here.
Right.
And I know George Bush was good for telling us no child left behind, which means you could be dumb as a box of rocks, growing a full protein, right, in a bald spot, and we're going to pass you ahead, and you can be 19 years old with a bunch of 7th graders. But I believe God works that way. You'll sit there and repeat that lesson until you pass it, because I can't bless you what I got for you until I know you can do the math on this level. So,
and that really connects back to how you opened up the conversation about why we should value the human experience, right? Because the physical body in the dimension of time and space gives us the opportunity as consciousness in a bodysuit to get right whatever we, make the math energetically and consciously where we may have needed to redo the equation the last time we had the opportunity to have a vehicle to exercise that like through consciousness. We got 2 minutes, Shaman. Go ahead.
Oh, no, exactly. I mean, that's true. And we have to remember, we're always going back home. Like you said, you broke it down really well with the Buddhist teachings when you talked about we're going to merge back into the universe as we left. And so we have to understand, as human beings, we come through that birth canal and we forget what we came here for. And then we have to remember. That's why this existence is a school of remembering. And as we begin to remember, then we can elevate and then we can actually overcome a lot of the things that we came here to do. However, if we don't overcome, then what happens is we merge back into the universe like we came in, and then we're going to have to come back and do it again. So we got to cherish this human experience and don't be so ready to get out of it and get rid of it, because if you get rid of it or leave this experience now, what's going to happen is you're going to come back the same way. Your soul is physically, you're not going to come back as you, but the spirit is going to basically come back to finish its journey. And that's what we got to understand, because we got to understand that the spirit remembers. So when we drop this physical body and we begin to go up into the heavens, then they're like, oh man, we got to do this again. And now we got to figure out how to remember, because the conscious is smart as well. It's really well, and we really got to lose the negative thoughts. And one of the quotes from the Dalai Lama is this: the way to overcome negative thoughts and destructive emotions is to develop opposing positive emotions that are stronger and more powerful. So if we can do that, then we can begin to make the shifts and changes. And that all goes and starts with shadow work. And shadow work is nothing but teaching you awareness about yourself. That's all it is.
And cultivating those divine qualities within.
Divine qualities, yeah.
So
we cultivate divine qualities, we begin to express them, we cultivate them, we embody them, we become them. And then life just changes,
Yes, absolutely. We got 30 seconds left. Dr. Karim, you want to say anything in 15 seconds?
Your thoughts create your results. Remove your limitations, or your limitations will remove you.
Yes, I love it. And
Yeah.
I'm just going to close out by saying, with courage, you can do anything. and energy elevation equals real life transformation. You have been listening to Conversations in Courage with your girl, Imani Capri, Dr. Karim R. Ellis, the #1 breakthrough strategist, and Dr. Shaman Rah, the one who says what's on the inside manifests on the outside. Join us next week, same day, same time, same place. Until then, peace.